Hey, Nick, I wanted to ask you about Nick and the job he's done this year and his future, his contract being up after next year.
Yeah, no, I mean, Nick has done a phenomenal job, just as we expected when we hired him. Incredible leader, attention to detail, love of football, incredibly passionate, able to connect with everyone in the organization, the players, his coaches, picks excellent coaches under him, loses coaches and picks excellent coaches to replace. Just outstanding job. It's what can I say? What we look for in a coach may not be the same as every other franchise. I've never selected a coach really that's been interviewed by other franchises, and starting with Andy Reid. And so what we look for is something that sometimes I think is less valued, sort of in the public sphere or in the NFL sphere. And Nick and his coaching staff have done just an amazing and wonderful job. And his future is going to be great. And we never talk about contracts or whatever ever publicly in 30 years, so I'm not going to start now, but he's great.
What's made this run unique or different than the other runs you've had? This run for the Super Bowl. What's distinguishable about this one relative to the other ones you've had?
They've all been great. I don't want to compare teams. They're all incredible teams. I think some of the similarities, though, are humble, team-oriented, superb culture. This team is incredibly talented, top to bottom. Star power, depth, passion for the game, but also humble and team-oriented. And so were all the other teams. So it's very hard to compare. Our focus is all on this team, this quest, and couldn't be more proud of the players, the coaches, Howie and his staff.
Why is your style of ownership so different than, say, at Jerry Jones? How does it work for you?
I think everybody has to be true to what they believe in. I grew up obsessed with sports, all four major American sports. I admired certain organizations. I admired certain people that drove my values. I've talked about it before. And those that I select to work as coaches and GMs and presidents of teams and player development and all that, it's just, it incorporates everything I believe in. And I'd have to say everything Howie believes in. And we just have this culture that we believe in. Everyone has to do it differently. I have a lot of respect for Dallas. They've won 12 games, I think 3 years in a row until this year. They had a lot of injuries. So, I think you've got to maintain a lot of respect for the way other teams do it, but be true to how you do it.
There's reports out there about your interest in the Celtics. Anything? Can you confirm that or deny it or address it?
No. I mean, I'm not really interested in acquiring another sports team. I think it's connected because, they were my childhood team. I've got a tremendous amount of respect for their whole culture. I sort of see it as like a kindred soul in the NBA. Wick has been an outstanding owner. I love the way they've developed that team, and we've got to celebrate so many banners over the years. It's not something that's top of mind, and my whole focus is on my love of the Eagles and to win another Super Bowl for Philadelphia. And I'm obsessed, as you know, and that's where it all comes from.
How important is the stability of Nick and Howie for the long-term success of this organization?
I think what we have is a stability of culture and a stability of special people. You have to be able to adjust to the strengths and weaknesses of everybody, and we've always been able to do that. Howie's worked with me for over 20 years, Don Smolensky over 20 years. And Nick really personifies so much of what we believe in, as I said. So It's stability's great, but stability's great when you're having excellent people have that stability. Otherwise, that's not the case.
Jeffrey, your team's about to play in the Super Bowl, like Kansas City team, that there's this perception that the NFL and the refs, Roger talked about this today,
Yeah, you did.
they're biased toward it. How do you want your players and your team to handle that potential situation?
Yeah, the refs do the best job they can, and the best way to handle that is to not play in a close game and to do what we did with Washington and, dominate. And after a while, that's the only way. I mean, there's so many games in the NFL determined by a call. Obviously what happened with a minute and 48 seconds 2 years ago is something you got to be resilient and deal with, right? So it's up to us to make sure, that we play a great football game on Sunday, and that kind of eliminates all the thoughts.
If you look at the offseason you had, an offensive player of the year candidate, defensive player of the year candidate,
Yep.
2 rookie of the year candidates, what worked this offseason that you can move forward with?
Well, first of all, if you go to the draft, it was an unusual situation for us where the players we were hoping were on the defensive side, it turned out, and the entire early part of the draft was all offense and mainly quarterbacks. So we never thought that Quinyon Mitchell would be a possibility where we were drafting. And the irony of it all is that we had another player have an equal grade, which has almost never happened in our, in my history, where it's literally a tie. And so when we chose Quinyon, we made a commitment that we would do everything possible to get Cooper. And we never thought it would be possible. We went to bed that night and thought, there's just no way. I mean, lasted to 32. That was shocking. And then we thought, no way. And then the Rams made that trade, and we threw up our hands and said, okay, they got him a pick ahead of us. They took an excellent young player, Braden Fisk, and we got Cooper. So it was sometimes things work out. Sometimes the player you want gets taken one before you. In this case, we had 2 players we projected as major stars in the league, and we got them. We had always hoped to be able to. We've always actually valued the running back position, going way back to Ricky Waters and LaShawn McCoy and Brian Westbrook, and second contracts for Brian and for Shady, and then Swift, and all that. So we've never kind of confused replaceability with impact. You can make an argument for replaceability with running backs. That's an accepted fact. But impact, when you can find one that's outstanding, we always thought to pair it with a great offensive line and a triple threat quarterback to accentuate the ability of that running back to have lots of open space was something we always wanted to do, emphasized. And, Saquon, it was just something where you had a player that we always recognized was a world-class talent, historical talent. What would happen if we were ever able to get Saquon with this offensive line and this triple threat quarterback and the skill position players we had? Credit to Howie, to be able to really focus on that, stay on it, and understand the allocation of resources for that was similar to a good reserve guard or tight end or whatever. And as we internally discussed it, it was a no-brainer because where we were at as a franchise, if we didn't have that offensive line or that triple threat quarterback, I don't know that we would have projected it the way we did. But it was like huge upside there. And as I said, we're not risk averse. The downside was it wasn't going to work out quite that great, and we could deal with that. So, and credit to Howie, and a credit to the coaches developing Zach Bond and others throughout the last few years. The development of those young players has been a real key core to our success. It's one thing to draft Nolan Smith or Jalen Carter, or you name it. The list goes on and on and on. It's developing them into major players in the league that really is the difference.
Jeffrey, what you hoping to clarify Do you expect to be part of a group that does bid on the Celtics?
You know, I don't expect anything. Really, we're not. I would never say never, but I'm not looking to own another sports franchise. The Celtics, again, are exceptional. They're so well run. They're so talented. It's my childhood team. However, I do not expect that to happen.
Jeff, what's the biggest difference you've seen in Howie since you reinstated him in 2016 from first?
Yeah, I think true for probably a lot of general managers, experience and a sense of self-analysis, humility, and the ability to understand on every single either hit or mistake what are the reasons. And in our culture and the way we organize things, and Howie is at the forefront of this, it's really a multiple factored analysis with every player, every draft, every decision. It's not a reductionistic system, and there's no recency bias. These are important factors in success. If you reduce it to one or two factors, like we've got to fix this and we've got to do this, I think you'll make a lot of short-term mistakes. When you focus on the real analysis of players, and we've been able to do that the last several years, bringing in combination of everything that goes into a selection of acquisition, it's so multifaceted. In a weird way, it's like a health problem. You try to reduce cancer to one thing, and you'll never find the puzzle. The puzzle with athletes is there's a multiplicity of factors. So how do those emerge? And are they team-oriented? Do they have the physical toughness, the mental toughness? How do you project them? It's going to be different than the rest of the NFL. We're going to miss on some obvious players, and we're going to try to hit on some players that aren't maybe as obvious, or maybe they are. But there's, I think, a tendency in sports sometimes to be very reductionistic and focus on recency bias. Those are things we try to avoid.
In many cases, the Eagles can come off as the villain, but
I can't hear you, unfortunately.
in many cases, the Eagles can sometimes come off as the villain in these situations, but it feels like
Comes across as what?
villain. It feels like in this
Villain?
villain. VILLA.
That we come off like a villain.
A villain?
Yeah, like the villain. But in this case, it's kind of like a role reverse for the chief of the villain. You think about that? Is it different in the situation?
Villain? I don't see it that way. I just see it as two extremely well-coached, talented teams that have made it this far, as it was 2 years ago, and phenomenal for the NFL. And there's no, I don't find there's a villain aspect. I mean, it's just, obsessed with winning another championship for Philadelphia. That's all it is.
The other thing I wanted to ask is, you're now one of the most longest-standing owners in the league. Has the league evolved to a certain way that you're seeing come to the surface now, or are you seeing something change overall in how the league's comprised?
I think the league always evolves.